How many of you remember that song by the Goodman, or by Vestal Goodman? How many of you ever saw them in person at a Gaithers concert or something? Boy, they were quite the singing family. Looking for a City, that was one of her trademark songs, and a beautiful song. So, I'm going to ask a question here. Where are you from? Okay? Now, so let's back up. Anyone here not born in Oklahoma? Raise your hand. Well, wow. Yes. So, where were you born?
St. Louis.
Huh?
St. Louis, Missouri.
St. Louis. Now, did you live there for a while?
Nope, I moved to New York about a month after I was born.
To New York. How long did you live there?
Until I was 9.
Okay. And where were you born? Waco, Texas. Did you live there for a while? No.
About a year.
And then come to Oklahoma? No.
All cities in Texas.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. And I know you're from Peru, born in Peru, and you lived there till you were...
Yeah, 28, 29, then I moved to New York and Texas, and then I come home.
Okay. Okay. So I was born in Texas and was there for, I don't know, I think I was 9 months old, and we moved to Oklahoma, and I've been in Oklahoma ever since. So I have, other than going back as I got older, I have no recollection, obviously, of that time. But those of you who lived in other places for a little while, do you have a desire to go back to those places?
Yes.
Yes. That's home. That's home. New York? Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Texas? Okay. Isn't that interesting? You know, how we get moved around by life, so to speak, and yet we have a connection to maybe another location, and maybe we've been here for 10, 20, 30 years or more, but we have that connection back there. We have that home. So that's a little bit of the scriptures that we're going to read this morning. That thought right there. And so the title, Looking for a City, a thought out of that, how can we live well here? How can we live well here? And the answer we're going to see from these verses. This is, and many of you, or most of you are familiar with Hebrews chapter 11. It's called the Hall of Faith. It is a list of many of the Old Testament characters and people that we read about as we read through the Old Testament, and it emphasizes their faith and how they lived their lives. So we're just going to read these scriptures, and then we'll come back and we'll kind of look at some of the thoughts there. So we begin Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. And this begins with a simple, well, I won't say simple, but a definition of faith. Now, and I am reading from the King James, and if you have another translation, that's good. It can expand our ideas here about these words. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, pardon me, the evidence of things not seen. For by it, the elders, the ones we're going to read about, these people of the Old Testament, for by it the elders obtained a good report. They lived well. Through faith, we understand that the worlds, not only this globe, this earth, this universe, and all the other universes, but the ages that we've experienced, we understand that the worlds were framed by the Word of God, so that things which are seen were not made of things which do appear. By faith, now we begin to read about certain people. By faith, Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and by it he being dead yet speaks. By faith, Enoch was translated that he should not see death. An interesting situation there. And was not found because God had translated him. For before his translation, he had this testimony that he pleased God. Verse 6, but without faith, it is impossible to please him. For he or she that comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. By faith Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, never had happened, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world, and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. By faith Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, he obeyed. And he went out, not knowing where he was going, where he went. By faith he sojourned, he dwelt in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tents, we'd say today, with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs of the same promise. Verse 10, for he looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Verse 11, through faith also Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed, and was delivered of a child when she was past age, because she judged him, God, faithful, who had promised. Therefore sprang there even of one, and him as good as dead, so many as the stars of the sky in multitude, and as the sand which is by the seashore innumerable. Now, here's what they have to say about these people. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country. And truly, if they had been mindful of that country from whence they came out, they might have had opportunity to have returned. But now they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly. Wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he hath prepared for them a city. Great passage of Scripture. Talks about the saints in the Old Testament, the people that we read about. Talked about Enoch, talked about Noah, talks about Abraham and Sarah and all of these people, and how they lived their life. And it was by faith. God used them through their faith in him. And so this gives us an insight into their thinking, into what was in their mind, what was in their heart. And actually, with all of those examples and the things that we read about them, I call your attention to those last four verses beginning in verse 13. All of these, and then others that he's going to mention after that, these all died, and that is something that will occur. These all died not having received the promises. Now remember, what was faith? He defined it. Faith is the substance, that which you can grasp hold of, the substance of things hoped for, expected, based on God's promises. That's what faith is. It's the evidence of things not seen. And so these died seeing, looking ahead, and believing, but they didn't receive the promises. They didn't grasp that on a physical basis of life. They didn't have it in their hand. They, it just wasn't real in the sense that tangible would be a good word. But here's what they did do. Notice verse 13. But having seen them by the promises, by the Word of God, by the promises of God, they saw these ahead. Now that seeing, it wasn't just a vision. It wasn't just a, boy, I'd like for that to happen. They, by faith, envisioned what God had promised. And this helped them live each day. This is how they were able to live well, by looking ahead. I don't know how you drive a car. Thank God of those here, the only person I've ridden with is Michelle. I know how she drives. But, one of the things that any defensive driving course will say to you is look ahead. Look ahead. See what's in your driving future. Look, if you're driving down the highway, look a quarter of a mile or more ahead. Not just, most people, I see some smiles here. I'm guessing some people don't look too far ahead, maybe. A lot of people, the furthest they see is the tail lights on the car in front of them. That's as far as they're looking, and they don't see what's going on beyond them. Trust me, I see this with drivers all the time. But looking ahead, you get a vision, a view of what's up there. They couldn't see what was going to happen tomorrow or the next day or the next month or the next year, nor can we. But by God's promises, we know there is a future ahead for us as believers. God is not through with us yet. As long as we're living and breathing here, He has something in our future that can bring glory to Him. And by looking at His promises, we can see the end. We can see the final result. We may not know what happens here in between, but we know what the goal is. We know what's coming. So they saw, but not only that, having seen them afar off, notice it says they were persuaded. They were, and another word you could use here, they were convinced. They were convinced. It's one thing to think something. It's one thing to hope something. It's one thing to see what people are saying. It's another to actually be convinced. And an interesting thing here, another thought of this word persuaded is to make friends. Now, that doesn't even seem to go with persuading and convincing, to make friends. How many of you have a lot of acquaintances in your life? Yeah, everybody. We got a lot of acquaintances. How many of you have some real, true friends that you can count on? The acquaintances may be a large number. The real, true friends that you can count on may be just a few people. What's the difference? How did you make friends with these people? Well, probably because over time you learned about them. You learned that maybe they were genuine. Maybe they were faithful. Maybe they were kind and loving. And over time, you grew a close relationship. That's being convinced. And so with the promises of God, with the things they saw, they became convinced. They made friends with those things. They said, this is what God has said, and I'm going to believe it. And I'm going to draw those things close to me. Then it says, they embraced them. They embraced them. So that literally means they brought them close and they hugged them. You know, one of the favorite times of my day is when Michelle looks at me and she says, I like you. You know, I like being around you. And then she gets close and she'll hug me and I'll hug her. And, you know, isn't it good that you can have somebody that you can actually hug? And I'm just going to say this. We probably don't do enough hugging in our lives. Now, I know we live in a time when some of that's kind of frowned on and what have you. But, you know, we ought to be a little more into hugging people. There's... And okay, so maybe just keep that with family or whatever. I don't know, whatever you want to do. But there is something powerful about that embrace from someone, that they just hug you and let you know that they like you and they're surrounding you. And so they embraced these promises. They didn't just see them afar off. They didn't just make friends. They literally hugged these promises, drawed them close to them, and let those promises hug them. And then it says, they saw them afar off, they were persuaded, they embraced them, and then they confessed. They said something. They confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims. Now, in the original there, those two words are almost identical. They have the idea of being a foreigner. You know, a foreigner. We'd use the word alien today, you know, that's a big political term. But they were strangers, they were foreigners. They confessed this. How do you confess that? That I'm living here, I'm on this earth, and, you know, we do get comfortable here, you know, we do. We get comfortable in what we do. You know, we find our niche in life, what our talents and our mind and our whole being, what we're geared that we can do to accomplish things, and it blesses others, it blesses us, it provides for us. We get comfortable in those things. So how are we strangers? That's what he says here. They confess that they were foreigners. The difference between these two words, and we don't use the word pilgrims a whole lot except around Thanksgiving. We talk about the pilgrims. Well, what does that word really mean? It means a stranger, it means a foreigner. But the difference, the first word, strangers, is the idea that they really don't have a knowledge of where they are, what's going on. We do have a knowledge. I mean, we grew up in this world. We learn things from this world. So we do have a knowledge. But we also have a knowledge, or we are replacing that knowledge with the knowledge of God and the knowledge of heaven. And the second word basically means that they're living in a strange place. You ever live in a strange place? I mean, you know, how about when you did move from one place to another? And that first night there, strange place, you know. So they actually said, we're strangers. We're foreigners. There's something about us now that makes this strange to us, that makes this foreign to us. And we look about and we see it as a strange place. Now let's go a little further. Verse 14. For they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country. We're looking for something else. This is what they said. I'm looking for something else. Are you looking for something else? Or are you satisfied with here, with now, with what you have? Are you satisfied? Are you happy with just this place? I hope not. I hope not. I mean, we all need to be happy. We need to be satisfied, you know. But I hope that we're looking for something more. Not physical, not material, but spiritual. Something more in our lives. And so it says that they would say such things, declare plainly that they're seeking a country. They're seeking something else. Verse 15. Now here's what I like about this. And this is why I opened with that other thought. Verse 15, and truly, if they had been mindful of that country from whence they came, if they had been mindful where they came from. Now, there is nothing wrong with desiring to go back to Texas, to go back to New York, to go back to Peru. That's home. That's home. Home to me is Oklahoma. Home to me now is Shawnee. You know, and you've heard me say this, I grew up in the little town south of here called Dibble. Y'all ever been through Dibble? Yeah. Dibble is one of those places that you don't... Are you from Dibble? No, but you've been there, huh?
We drove through there a couple of weeks ago to show her where you was.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, if you blink, you've missed Dibble. Just a wide spot on the highway there, but that's where I grew up. Now, I have to say this. Since I left there when I was 18, I have never desired to go back and live in Dibble. Nothing wrong with you Dibbleites, but I've just not desired to go back there. That's not home anymore. You know, that's not home. Now, what's that old saying? Home is where your heart is. Now, that is really true. That is really true. And what this verse is saying, they have a new home. Just like some of us might not want to go back to where we grew up, where we were born and all of that stuff. We have a new home. And for you and I as believers, if we were to dwell on this earth, I don't mean live on this earth, if our minds were to dwell on this earth, on earthly things, on material things, if our minds were to dwell on what you see and have and touch and all of that, we might be happy here. We might enjoy this more. But he says of these people, their mind was not from where they came. Their minds were on what God had, what God promised, the spiritual side. And yes, we're going to live here, we're going to exist down here, we have to do all of the things necessary to do that on this earth, but we don't have to be at home here. We can look beyond to God's country, to God's city. And so he says in verse 16, but now but now. They desire a better country. That song that Vestal Goodman sang, Looking for a City. The lyrics, the words for the verses describe what life down here is like, but it points then to the fact that we're looking for what God has in store. We're looking for a city. We're looking beyond this part. And so he says, they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly, wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he hath prepared for them a city. Looking for that city. Looking for what God has for you. So how do we live well here? Well, we're looking ahead. We're looking for that city. But every day of our lives, we're looking for what God has for us now. That spiritual blessing, that challenge, that opportunity that God has for us. That's how we do well. May we stand.